Hello, my name is Brian Birchie, Safety Director at Horizon Transport, and today we're going to learn how to hook up to a truck. We will look at other hitching opportunities after this, but first we're going to do a very simple hookup, and that involves the main piece of equipment that you'll be working with and hooking to any bus, small box van like this, or tractor, and all trucks of many types. This is basically what they call the rail hitch. And as you can tell, this particular model, the ends come off. They will be bolt down with these two bolts. The nice thing about this design is up underneath, if this is in the way upside down, you can turn the whole unit the other way and then flip these around so that the bolts can be on the bottom if that's more convenient for your hookup. This side also has a removable end that can be twisted vertically up any way you want. On this particular model, this bar slides out to give you the length you need. This one does not stay or stays put. On another model that we have, we'll show how they have two arms that come out equally, but it's a doubled tubed construction. But this one's a really good one. The only difference about this one from the other one is it sometimes have to be offset from the truck, because this cannot be changed the length, whereas the other one, this length can change of the arm coming out. So first we're going to take this, get underneath our unit. I suggest using a wrench with a 7/8 inch head. As you can tell on these, they're square bolts. As you can tell, these bolts are a very tough bolt, and what makes them special is on the end you'll see that it has a cupped, grooved indent in there. The purpose of this bolt is when it goes onto the frame underneath the truck and this gets put into the frame, that cup actually will dig into the metal. It will actually leave two small little round circles when you're done, which is okay. So let's take our frame rail, start underneath. Okay, on this particular truck, this has an extension to the frame coming out here in square tubing. This is not anything you can hook to with this frame rail, but starting right here, you can tell that this is the part of the channel. It's a C-shaped channel that's on 95% of all these trucks and buses, and that's what we're going to put to. Now, the other thing we must look at when we're in a vehicle like this is you'll notice a piece of steel here that's coming off the bumper, and we have to come below the frame rail here in order to get the stinger, which is the long tube where you put the ball on the end, to come out the back without getting too low or too high. In this situation, we're using what's called a drop down. It's the most basic and simple of what we have, and this is just designed to make this unit more flexible. In this case, if we hold this up here, this is about where it normally would be going. And as you can tell, in this situation, this drop down is really too far down close to the ground. We want to make that a little higher to the top of the steel here. So in a situation like this, you sometimes got to think outside the box. Where we normally have the square receiver facing downward, because we have the ends that can be turned any direction, we can also turn it upwards, and this allows us to gain more clearance so that this drop down bar won't be too low to the ground. So we're going to do this. We're going to take our ends on this end, we're going to turn it downwards so we can easily screw the bolts in, and on this end, same thing. I'm going to put the bolts down. You want to try to have them always down. It's really hard to tighten them when you're having them facing upward. Basically all we do is we take this end, there's a C clamp on the end, we just slide it over the frame. Now because this end cannot move, we have to extend the arm that slides inside the back of these. So now as you can see, we are on both sides of the frame. Our clamps are over top of both of them. And in this case, we have the receiver tube facing upwards. Now just to see if this is going to work or not, I'm going to try fitting this in here. Sometimes things in the way, you have to turn it sideways, or sometimes you have to put the whole unit in with this in there before you even put it up to the frame. So once you have that in there, the length of the frame will dictate how far back you can put this. If you can, you always want to have any drop down or any other part of it towards the back side, so that the torque with your stinger that's going out will be less than if you had it coming all the way over here. It's too much of a length there and it will cause problems. So basically, now that we see that that's going to be about the right height, we'll put our pin in and start tightening these bolts down. Okay, now it's hard to see up in here, but I've taken one of these pins and I've put it in the square receiver here in the holes that are lining this drop down hitch. So basically it's tight in there, it's not going anywhere. A little bit of flexibility, but that's okay. There's a tightening bolt on the back here of this hitch that will keep that from moving around too much. Now, in addition to this tightening bolt, all of these bolts, this is the one holding the clamp to the bar, and this is the one holding the C clamp tightened to the frame. We want to make sure all those are tight. Finger tight them first. It's very important to notice that there are locking nuts on each of these bolts. When you turn these bolts up into tight position, you're just going to make them finger tight. You want to make sure that these bolts are far down from this nut here, because what will happen is if you start tightening this and that bolt is up against the nut is up against this bigger nut, it causes this bolt to tighten and it won't go in all the way, and it'll give you a false sense of tight. So you want to make sure those are all pulled out so that you make sure that when you turn them in, you're actually tightening the bolt and not the nut. So, want to take your wrench, you're just going to tighten these all down after you've gotten them finger tight. These square heads don't have a socket that fits them well, but the 7/8 inch usually will go over top of them to tighten them. This is a torque wrench. I usually put it at about 70 pounds, but any wrench will do. That was already pretty tight. Here, tighten this arm inside this tube so it can't sway or maneuver. One on top, one on bottom. Like I said before, there is one locking bolt on most of these newer hitches that will help secure that and make it not wobble so much. So, you can tell that it's tight, it's not going anywhere, but now comes the other nut on here. As I said before, this is a locking nut. You want to get that as tight up there as possible. All these. You want to take a wrench, and it doesn't take much. You can also get a bigger socket that will go over top of this. Welcome to do that too. It doesn't need to be much, just a little bit of a pull on it. Without having these nuts tight, with the movement of the truck, these bolts can come out. And especially right here, this is very important. You obviously don't want these coming out because that's holding the whole weight of your tow vehicle. So essentially, everything's secured here. As you can tell now, this is where we stop. So we need to find a way to get out beyond the truck. All right, we've now gotten another piece of equipment here. It's basically got the ball on the end, along what we call stinger. Basically, we're just going to slide that in there. We're going to find a distance that the holes fit, where the ball is enough outside of the edge of the back part of the bumper, so that when you put the hitch on, it will be able to move without having the truck hit the back of it. As long as it's usually beyond this back point, you're usually pretty safe. So we're going to take our pin in there, pin that there, same thing here. We're going to tighten that down with our wrench. Tight there. Okay, so we're ready to go. Now, all we have to do is get the truck hitch hooked onto the ball. This particular hitch is a Stowmaster 5000. It is probably the most commonly used for the car contractors that are very serious about the business. As you can tell, it folds up into a nice package for when you're traveling. This particular one has been modified. Usually this hitch comes with just this clamp on the end, and this one, a special tube has been put in there so that this can come out. The reason this has been made this way, which we'll show you later, is we also have a hitch that will go into the same receiver. That's what we call a pinto ring. And basically, it's, instead of this hitch, it's just a big ring that's attached to one of these tubes, and that's meant for a lot of the trucks that have a C-clamp version of a pinto, and it's just easier to hook on, and there's some weight benefits of doing that too. Probably about maybe 10% of the trucks that you'll be dealing with will have a pinto option, but this is just an easy way to make the transition easy. So I'm going to try to line up approximately where that's going to come to. Okay, we've gotten our truck into pretty much position of where it needs to go. Sometimes you'll have to drive it into position, maybe a little bit past, so that you can let it roll back. You have to be careful with this, especially if you're on any hills or inclines. If you do get it up to the spot where you need to put it down, you need to make sure that either it's in gear or the emergency brake's on, because the last thing you want is to try to get the hitch on the ball and not miss, and then have your truck go flying backwards and hit who knows what. So basically, we're on a pretty level ground here. So I got it lined up for the most part. Just needs to bring up a little bit farther. slams it down there. In this particular case, you'll put that in there. On almost all these hitches, there's a way to put a pin in there. Some little stuck. Did you get the picture? So basically, the truck is hooked up. I'm going to give it a quick test, make sure that you got very little sway in there. It's pretty tight. Now when you get to this point, you're going to put your safety chains. Sometimes they're cables. In this case, it's a 10,000 pound tow strap. This is kind of a special setup. It's designed just for this truck. It's got a ratchet on it that allows you to pull out the strap as length you need. And then instead of using a chain and trying to put the chain together with bolts to decrease the length, you can just ratchet it up. It'll bring it back into the correct length you need. Pulling this out as far as it'll go. Like I said, with chains, you'll usually have to either add or subtract or double up the chain in order to get the right length. With straps, a lot of them are either the straight strap or the curly type, and those have their own special abilities and problems. There's a misconception that on this frame rail there's two pieces here, and a lot of drivers for some reason think that that is where you're supposed to hook your safety chains to, on there. That is absolutely not correct. That is not what they're designed for. This is basically just a handle to help you get the hitch up into the position you need it to be. The other thing you don't want to do is, however you try, you do not want to put your cable, chains, or straps to any part of this setup. Because what happens if for some reason these bolts do come loose and this frame rail comes off, and if these straps are attached anywhere on this part of it, guess what? If that comes off, your straps come off too, and it doesn't do you a bit of good. Your car will be going down the road behind you. So what we want to do is we want to find a place on the frame that you can wrap it around so that if something does come off here, it will always be attached to the frame. In this case right here, solid steel, it's part of the frame. It's on here. Just clamp that on there. That on there. Now, the other thing that you'll notice that's very important is that whether you're using chains or cables or straps, they are crossed. This is a DOT requirement. You will get fined big time if you do not have those crossed. Now, in this situation with the straps, like I said before, now we want it to get to a point where they're not going to touch the ground. The nice thing about the straps is they have some flexibility. They can stretch to some degree, which the chains and most of the cables, unless you get the curly kind, will not do. But as you notice, we've got them crossed. They're off the ground, and they've got enough flexibility that if we turn, the straps won't get in the way of the hitch or cause it to break. Okay, that's the basics for hooking up. One thing we have not done in this video is hook up the lighting system. On this particular one, I have a 4-prong hitch there to hook to. we're leaving it off of this one. Actually, if you want to know how to hook up the lighting, there is a separate video on the Horizon Contractor site that basically says electrical connections, and that will show you all the different opportunities you have and options for different types of lights, whether they're round, square, different ways to tap into lights. So for today, we're going to forego that. The only other thing you need to make sure of is whatever vehicle you're using, each vehicle is different, but you want to make sure the vehicle is set to a way in which it tows the best, or that you don't have any problems. In this particular truck, it's a four-wheel drive, so I have to have the transmission case in neutral and the gear shift in neutral. Different vehicles have different ways to set up the steering and the shifting. Most cars are going to be a standard transmission. There are a few automatics that can be towed, and each car again is going to be different. So make sure you check with a shop or a dealership and find out what is the way that you can have your key in the right position, that your steering wheel does not lock, and then you make sure none of your brakes, emergency brakes, or that's in gear in any way. Because if you do that, you could cause serious damage to the truck and your tires as well. You'll notice that I have my nice green Horizon t-shirt on. When you're doing this underneath trucks, you obviously will get very dirty. So if you're about to deliver this to a unit, or if you're hooking up to a truck, you'll always want to take an extra shirt or coveralls or something along that you can put on while you're hooking up, and then before you deliver, obviously you will put on your nicer shirt for delivery so that you don't have grease and look like this. Okay, what we've completed is a fairly basic setup. This is going to be how the majority of your units are going to hook up. Now, depending on the type of unit, especially if it's a tractor or maybe a dump truck, it could be just a cab and chassis, there's going to be possibilities that your current hitching options like this are not going to work. You're going to have to maneuver around tires or gas tanks or something. Now, if you get this package, which is available at Martin's, his basic package has all the items we just talked about, and it includes this piece here, which basically allows you to adjust the different angle at which the ball will be put on. This is good especially if you have like a tractor that has a sloped back. If you have your receiver on the tractor, a lot of times your bar will come off like this, and so it won't be even. So by able to adjust your angle, you'll be able to make it so that your ball is even with the ground. What you want to avoid is sometimes if you have a situation where it is sloped, and if your ball comes out like this, this is not good, because when the hitch comes down over top of this, it can pull off because it's at too much of an angle. This piece here allows you to adjust that so it's perpendicular to the ground. All these pieces here, this piece, and what's on the truck comes in Martin's standard package. The rest of these are just extras that you can use for different options, different trucks. This is just simply an extension. Sometimes you'll have a frame underneath a truck that's really far back, and you'll need to have an extra bar to come out from behind the truck. So that allows you to do that. This is just a shorter bar for shorter extensions. Sometimes in certain situations you want to put your hitch on vertically. So that's adjustable hitch using those two. This also goes with Martin's standard package. This particular unit is made for usually liftgate trucks. A lot of time on the liftgate there's no way to hook to the frame because the liftgate is in the way, but on most of these trucks there's a solid steel square bar in the bottom, but the problem is it's not square with the ground, it's on an angle to the ground. So basically what this piece is you put this on the bottom, you put this on the top, put 4 bolts through there and tighten it down, and that'll give you the receiver for you to be able to take a truck of that type. This is an example of the same bar we use, but it's an older style. It's a little heftier. You can see it's got 3 bolts on the end, and it's got 2 tubular steel pieces instead of 1. This is okay to use if you can find one, but the problem is the reason the other hitch was made is that sometimes this width is a problem getting into some of these trucks. On the end here is just a angled receiver. Basically, if you don't have one of these where you can adjust the angle and you've got a situation where you're coming off at an angle, this allows you to make it even with the ground again. There's a few other types of hitches that you can get that are used for more specialty situations, certain types of trucks. As you can see with our hookup, we're using straps. Like I said before, you can use chains. A lot of people use cables. Some of them are just plain straight cables. Some of them are curly that allow it to expand. This is nice because you can adjust the length without having to change your cable. I wanted to show this type of cable here. A lot of these hitches, especially the cheaper ones, come with a cable that's rated for under 3,000 pounds. These we would strongly suggest you do not use because these can break and snap. These particular cables here are usually rated for 7,000 pounds, so you want to make sure you have a sturdy cable to do this. When I started in driveway, which is actually coming on 12 years ago, I started with no tow vehicle and no CDL. The first thing I actually did was get a tow vehicle. It was a $800 S10 pickup. It made it through 6 months, but that's all I needed. By having the tow vehicle, I would venture to guess that you will double your income from trying to use public transportation. These hitches, you can get a basic package for about $400, and then you can get a bunch of other hitches that can, everything you see here is about $1,000, but that will usually pay for itself many times over. So this is the next step in drive-away services. You can start out being a person that uses public transportation, but just having the tow vehicle will greatly expand your options and your income potential. Thank you for viewing this video.